Welcome to Disruptive Successor, a show for next generation leaders in family businesses and entrepreneurs who want to disrupt the status quo and take their existing business to a whole new level. We all know that what got us here isn't going to get us there. This show will provide inspiration, advice, and resources to help you create massive impact. This podcast is sponsored by myself, Jonathan Goldhill, and my company, the Goldhill Group, where we provide coaching for growing companies. I'm Jonathan Goldhill, and my purpose is simple: to guide entrepreneurial leaders in family businesses towards more freedom and fulfillment. I want entrepreneurs to get clarity around the changes that will make them and their businesses more successful so they can experience the same freedom I've enjoyed in my life. Our proven practices challenge business owners to think differently about their business and how they're running it, and quite literally become game changers in our clients' companies. Learn more at thegoldhillgroup.com website, where you can schedule your free strategy session. Welcome, I'm Jonathan Goldhill to another episode of the Disruptive Successor Show. Today's show will explore how to modernize family businesses, particularly in industries that tend to be more traditional or antiquated, such as construction, home health, contracting, and equipment rental. Many family-run businesses in these sectors still rely on outdated methods and haven't embraced the technology needed to address today's challenges. My guest today will share insights on how logistics and construction technology, including centralized procurement platforms, can help the next generation of leaders, those disruptive successors out there, to modernize their operations, improve efficiency, and ultimately grow their family businesses. Small and medium-sized family businesses like the ones I coach are facing significant challenges today. Several of them include narrowing profit margins. Rising material costs, transportation expenses, and increased competition are squeezing profit margins, especially in industries like construction and equipment rental. Family businesses often operate on smaller scales, making it difficult to absorb these costs without impacting profitability. Labor shortages is another problem. One of the most pressing issues is the ongoing labor shortage, which heavily affects the construction sector. Finding skilled workers has become increasingly difficult, and many family-owned companies struggle to meet demand. This labor gap makes it harder for businesses to scale or take on larger projects. And finally, adapting to technology. Another major challenge is the slow adoption of technology. Many family businesses are hesitant to invest in modern tech, whether due to cost concerns or a lack of time to implement them, or just familiarity with the current ways of doing business. This hesitation leaves them vulnerable to inefficiencies and makes competing with larger, tech-savvy companies harder. For example, failing to implement tech solutions like centralized procurement or AI-driven logistics platforms in construction and logistics can hinder growth and scalability. My guest today is Scott Cannon, the CEO of BigRentz, who has successfully led the company from a startup to a leading construction procurement platform. With a strong background in logistics, Scott applies his expertise to solve complex challenges in the construction industry, focusing on improving efficiency and reducing costs for contractors. Under his leadership, BigRentz now connects contractors to over 14,000 rental yards nationwide, streamlining equipment procurement and management. Scott, welcome to the show today. We've got a lot to talk about.
Thank you, Jonathan. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, so I want to just give a little bit of background about yourself, where you're located, how you got started in this business, and then we'll get into some of the stuff that I've queued up for us.
Sure. So I'm headquartered in Irvine, California. I got into the business really from a private equity company that invested in BigRentz in 2014. I've previously run a logistics company that sold to a private equity group, and they were one of my partners. And they had this little company with this idea of bringing e-commerce solutions to small contractors. And I didn't really know what I was getting in at the moment. I was retired. I was looking forward to that retirement, never to work another day in my life. And I just fell in love with the business and the people. We had just an incredible CTO and CFO, two of the most intelligent, stubborn, most enjoyable people I've ever worked with in my life. And we've taken it from the idea to help small contractors and small rental companies to really procurement platform that's nationwide and solves many of the problems that you mentioned before in the intro.
So let's talk about how can modern technology, like the platform you've built at BigRentz, help family-run construction, contracting, and equipment supplier businesses streamline operations and improve profitability. Like, what does BigRentz actually do?
Well, in short, we meet demand and supply, but maybe to describe how it helps these industries, I should maybe go back to how these industries were formed. And so post World War II, the equipment industry sort of began, and small rental companies across the United States, all family-owned businesses, small, multi-generational, and then most contractors would buy equipment. And then as we've had financial crises over the last 30, 40 years, the percentage of people buying equipment versus renting it have declined. And these rental companies sort of boomed across the United States. And in the late 90s, early 2000s, several private equity groups came into the space and rolled up a number of small businesses. And today it's still fragmented. There are thousands of small rental companies across the United States, but there's a group of very large companies, and then there's thousands of small mom and pops. And what these small mom and pops and family-owned businesses lack is the ability to advertise themselves on a national platform to get national accounts of contractors who do business in multiple different locations. And it's always worked where you have a small contractor in a small town with a local rental yard where they have that relationship. But when they branch out to other locations or do things that require equipment they don't have, they've always had one or two choices. You either go with a national provider who's very expensive, or you buy the equipment. And what BigRentz has done by having so many locations in our network is really given companies the options not to buy equipment and to source your equipment as close to the job site as possible.
Great. So let's back up a little bit and just understand what are some of the biggest challenges that family businesses in this space face when adopting new technology, and your thoughts on how they can overcome these barriers.
Well, cost is always a major impediment, and then know-how. Most family-owned businesses can't develop their own software and market themselves online. And BigRentz, because we've absorbed that cost on behalf of these small companies, we're a tool and a resource for them to grow creatively without having to spend that additional money on marketing and or technology. We have tools that use an AI and spatial analysis that help our customers, small contractors, know where to get the equipment the cheapest and the fastest and with the best service. And on the flip side, small rental companies that are primarily one or two location, couple $1 million businesses, get creative revenue. I'll give you an example of a local supplier in a group that we've done $600,000-$700,000 of business in the last year and a half, 2 years, and driven 350 new customers to that supplier that they wouldn't have been able to get on their own. We indemnify them from a liability standpoint. We absorb the risk and consolidate a very problematic space. If you had 350 new small contractor customers, that's going to cause a lot of friction. You have to customer service it. You have to go through rental agreements, damages, claims, stolen equipment. We take care of that on behalf of the rental supply company. And for a customer, we educate them. A lot of times customers don't know how to use the equipment or don't know how to navigate that relationship. And it's a really standardized process that allows these small companies to really take advantage of us to grow their businesses and focus on what's really core to them, their value system, developing their customer service, focus on getting the best value of equipment they can get and not worry about necessarily marketing and sales.
And so does this help them with labor? I mean, with labor shortages that I talked about, and we all know this is a pressing problem in construction. Um, does this technology help them stay more competitive in terms of like, is it reduce headcount at all, or is it just to allow them to streamline operations?
Well, it does both. I mean, we don't solve construction has a difficult problem getting
Sure.
qualified people, right?
Hmm.
So, and we have a shortage as a country of educating our youth on trades.
Hmm.
And that's been a problem for decades where we've all told our children to go to college, and that's the future instead of becoming a plumber or a HVAC technician. And it just so happens those are the most lucrative spaces for young people today. Um, I can't solve that problem, but what we can is take off some of the burden on the administrative side or the sales and marketing side so that both the contractor and the supplier can spend their time focused on the bigger problem than the skilled labor. And so we assist indirectly. It doesn't solve that skilled labor challenge. Those are bigger problems that need to be solved for everybody. But it does allow these companies to focus on their core strengths.
Yeah. Well, so I know you're the CEO of this company and not the salesperson, but I'm sure you could probably sell almost as well, hopefully, as your salespeople. What advice for these family businesses that are reluctant to adopt procurement technology due to perceived cost or complexity? What advice do you give them about the benefits of going with this type of tech?
Well, it's very low risk. So there's low risk, high reward.
Hmm.
We don't force suppliers or contractors come on our platform to use our services or business. It's a creative. So for a small family-owned rental company, it's automated. They'll get a text or an email with an available equipment. If they want to rent it to us, they click a button. It's a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Sends automatic purchase orders and everything's sort of automated. And if they don't, if there's an opportunity for them to put that piece of equipment to work elsewhere, they just do it. So there's no friction from that standpoint. Relatively simple. For contractors, where we're taking our technology, there is a cost. We're going to sell it as a SaaS product, but we measure it to have a 800 to 1,000% return on investment every year. The amount of time and the biggest cost in rental equipment is the transportation. It's roughly 40% of the cost.
Hmm.
So understanding the logistics of the relationship between a job site and where equipment's coming from and or trade or materials is critical to reducing cost. Um, BigRentz covers roughly 90% of the US population within a 30-minute drive with those 14,000
Wow.
rental yards. To give you a comparative, the largest company in the space has 1,400 locations throughout North America and can cover roughly 65-70% of the population within that same drive. So just by sheer density, we can save money. And it also matters in terms of service. If your equipment goes down at night, do you want your technician an hour away or do you want him 5 minutes away? And I think it's a fairly obvious conclusion. Again, relatively inexpensive. And the way we've set this up is to allow customers to use their own rental rates and for us to dynamically sort of price in there. So they're always getting the best option for themselves. Sometimes it actually does make sense to use the large national company, and many times it doesn't. You should go with a small independent. Support
Amazing.
small business.
Amazing. Absolutely. And so the contractors pay a subscription fee. Is that the SaaS model? I mean, and is it a monthly recurring, flat rate, or how does that work? Just out of curiosity.
So this is the new part of our business. We have the marketplace where you can go online today and you can rent a piece of equipment anywhere.
Hmm.
In terms of the SaaS business that we're in the midst of launching, it'll be an annual fee that's paid over 12 months or all at once, and it's based
Right.
on the usage. So the more you use the platform, it's a decline in sort of service fee.
Hmm.
The more money you pump through, the less as a percentage it is, but you do pay a little bit more. It's fairly similar to other procurement platforms in that way.
Interesting. Well, I've imagined as you've grown this business, as you grew the prior business, you've experienced your own unique logistics challenges that have emerged as you scaled. Um, what's an example of a challenge and how did you tackle it?
Well, I think one of the ones I continue to work on is remote work.
Hmm.
And that was kind of forced upon all of us in COVID. We didn't really have a choice. We had we bought two companies right as we walked into COVID. One closed, I think, March 1st, and the other one on April 1st, when we're in that 12-day bend the curve so we can all get back to work. And
Right.
they were in office situations. So, we thought we'd have plenty of time to work on the culture and integrate these companies quite well. And in fact, we didn't. And labor became much more of a challenge in 2021 and 2022, sort of the great resignation and
Yep.
hiring people in the 45 to $60,000 range just became impossible. They're jumping ship for 15-20% more. And we've now strategically outsourced many of our functions either overseas, in the Philippines, Pakistan, some development work in Poland, and down in South America as well. But it's very strategic in terms of how we did it. Our core functionality and the things that we value the most remain here in the States, and all the know-how in terms of the engineering and the key relationships and so forth. But even within the United States, being a small company of roughly 100 or so, they're scattered throughout. So, we have 10 or 12 here in Southern California, and that's the most concentration we have anywhere. And that's been the biggest adjustment for me. And it just culturally for me, I like to be in the office. I like to collaborate, see people, the color of their eyes when you're talking to them.
Hmm.
And these are things that, we had to overcome. In terms of the business, there was a fear when BigRentz started that we're here to disrupt, that we're going to hurt the small family-owned business, that
Sure.
like the big guys did, that we're going to go after them, and that it couldn't be further from the truth. I'd sort of wrap myself up into the family-owned businesses. We have 6,000 companies as part of our platform. 5,900 of them are 1 to 3 location, multi-generational family businesses. It is the American way. It's a fragmented market, and that helps. That's good for consumers. That's good for family-owned businesses. That's good for my business model. And we want to support those companies and help them grow and compete with the bigger companies that have more resources. There's already a competitive advantage for somebody like a United Rentals or Sunbelt who's going to buy equipment at a significant discount compared to the small family business. So we have to help level the playing field so that they can compete openly and continue to do things that are important to them, whatever value system they have of why they've created their business and what it means to their family. I want to support and I want to help grow it so it can continue from generation to generation.
It's a very interesting value proposition. So United Rentals and Sunbelt have a enormous balance sheet with a lot of equipment on their balance sheet, it sounds like. And
And
you have
technology.
and technology, and you have no equipment on your balance sheet, probably.
Zero.
Nice business model. Very interesting. Hey, let's go back to the hires and the outsourced in different parts of the world and the local ones. What's been one of the most difficult, or continues to be one of the most difficult hires for you? Are they overseas? Is it a unique team capabilities? Is it a local person who does, strategy? What's been a really difficult hire for you that other small business owners could probably relate to as well?
Sales and marketing. It,
Yeah.
it's just hard when you have salespeople who are remote and you don't get to see them on a day in, day out basis. It's, you hear me talk about my business, but do my salespeople talk about our business the same way?
Mm.
And unless you spend a significant amount of time and you're there to mentor, and just for them to absorb by osmosis the things that we talk about, it's difficult when it's remote. And there's a fair amount of freedom that those folks need in order to operate. And sometimes you're just not getting the most efficient, effective person, and mentoring young people is really difficult remotely. And I don't think that's ever going to change. And there are things you can do to mitigate it. We have structured one-on-ones. We top grade through our organization. We do all the right things from structurally, but it's a challenge. And it's going to always be a challenge.
I could understand that. There's an old saying that the revenue is in the relationships, and part of those relationships are internal customers, other employees that they're bouncing off of, getting ideas from, learning, keeping excited about the business. Very hard to manage that when they're in another part, they're outside of the office or another part of the world. Um, the old days that you come back into the office and you do some training together, but you don't even have that.
Well,
So,
Jonathan, nowadays nobody wants to come. Oh, not that's an
to,
exaggeration.
yeah,
Very few people want to come back to the office. And if
that's
you're under
true.
100 employees in California,
Yeah,
it's the percentage that even flexible is small. Most of
yeah,
it's remote work still.
yeah. All right. So, construction industry clients are facing tightening profit margins, and as I see, with the increase in interest rates that we've seen over the last couple of years, and certainly the uncertainty going into this election, which is now behind us, um, it slows certain projects down, especially on the residential side, because of this uncertainty. Um, where do you see the biggest opportunities for family businesses to improve efficiency and offset some of these rising costs from interest rates and things like that?
And the biggest problem that construction has is a productivity problem.
Mm,
If you look at the last 20 years or so, or you can go back the last 60, 70 years, construction productivity is relatively flat during that time. It just hasn't evolved or iterated. And the businesses are typically low single digit EBITDA numbers.
hmm
And the thing that eats away at profitability in construction is all the unknown. It's about getting the piece of equipment, the materials, and the labor to be on site exactly when they're supposed to be, not early, not late. And when that doesn't happen or something goes wrong, it just eats the small profit margin and it kills construction companies. And where I see a lot of contractors that are our customers, they've gone out and kind of shot for the moon. They got a project from Walmart. They're going to go to 60 Walmarts across the United States, and they're going to have to hire local crews and go place to place to place. And if everything goes perfectly right, they make that small margin. And then when that one piece of equipment doesn't work, or they don't realize that they can't get the equipment or the materials in that remote area, it's that oh shoot moment, and it's devastating to those businesses. And then when they get um, less so than interest rates, the bigger companies and the bigger general contractors and stretch out the payments. And these small guys are just squeezed. Um, they're the best business people. I'd say they're better than even restaurants because it's notorious cash flow problems in the space where you have to rob Peter to pay Paul. And the amount of stress and pressure put on these folks that's pushed down to them is just enormous. So where BigRentz can help and what we've done is like giving them the tools to be efficient and smart in their buying decisions. And that I think is the easiest, lowest hanging fruit for them to protect those margins. And it's something they all can do immediately. The more systemic problems are difficult. You can't control interest rates. You can't control the economy, but you can control is how you buy and how you manage your suppliers.
Yeah, I think it's a great solution that you're offering, and the labor problem is a real conundrum for a lot of them. I was on a webinar yesterday, a state of the industry webinar for the landscape industry, and they were talking about how difficult it is, the uncertainty of some companies with regard to their labor. I mean, obviously, some contractors are using illegal, unskilled labor, and they face a whole set of problems as we go forward with the new administration. But the other ones that are maybe in the eastern parts of the country that are relying on the HB2 visa program for their workers, and the allotment is uncertain coming into the spring season whether they're going to get one or 100. They just don't even know what bucket they fall into in terms of getting those people. So that's a really tough problem. So if they can control their equipment arrival on time, cost, that's one piece of the equation. The labor is just it's a tough challenge for
Don't you
sure.
think? Don't you think the immigration is an interesting topic and one that obviously people are very passionate about. But no matter how you fall on the topic, there are problems on both sides of that equation.
Yes.
As a demographically, as the United States is not growing, and we need people to
Right.
grow our economy.
Right.
And then on the flip side of that is we need skilled labor. as well. There's got to be a right solution, but you don't want to have illegal immigration. You need to have it in a structured way that works for everybody. That's very more thoughtful, and it'll be interesting the next few years with just changes fundamentally to the economy and so forth. It's going to be, no matter who wins on a political side, it's going to be disruptive. The things that I think as business leaders we can do is focus on the things we can control
Yes.
and try to ignore the noise, and just do the things that are in our power.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it seems to me, look, my clients are all working with legal immigrants that I know of. And the ones that aren't, they tend to be the less profitable companies
That's
because
right.
they don't have the best practices in place. So, um, look, as construction technology evolves, where do you see BigRentz fitting into the future of family-run contracting or construction businesses? Are there other innovations that family businesses should keep an eye on, others that you're looking at, like the SaaS model that you're about to roll out? What,
So,
yeah, what do you see for the future of these
well,
companies?
specifically from BigRentz, and then I'll get into sort of broader topics. The way we constructed our platform is we had 12 different price methods, and rental is fairly complex. You have a day, week, 4 week, and other iterations as well. Um, but we included purchase and hourly. I look at BigRent's long term as more of a job site bundled services, not necessarily focused just on equipment. So you can procure your technician or your trade, your materials and your equipment all holistically on one UI, one
Hmm.
interface. So you get a holistic view of the entire job site. That's the future of BigRents, and I think that's very powerful from a control standpoint and scheduling. 34% of the work week in construction is spent on non-optimal tasks.
Hmm.
And that costs the construction industry about $177 billion a year in lost productivity.
Wow.
So I think there's so much there
Right.
to low-hanging fruit. We'll feed at that trough for the next 15, 20 years. Um, Other technologies like what we've developed here, I think AI, particularly in BIM and modeling, for future construction projects to anticipate and be preemptive on supply chain issues. Those things are going to add tremendous value longer term. That doesn't typically affect the smaller family-owned business. Those are your really large general contractors that are forecasting out. But that does has trickle down impact to family-owned businesses. I think my my standpoint is I would not be in a rush to go spend a bunch of money on AI technology as a family-owned business. I would look at it in a very methodical, um, iterative
Hmm.
way of
Hmm.
just integrate the things you can. Certainly use the social models that are out there now, the chat GPTs, the perplexities and so forth, become familiar with it, understand how to use it as a tool and how to prompt. Um, but it's going to take a long time to integrate into the family business. So just spend a little bit of time and money just and be aware of it. I wouldn't go diving in the pool.
Yeah. I have a landscape client who uses ChatGPT every day. And actually, he's the only one I know who actually has the paid version of it. So obviously, he's seeing something different. And, this company in particular that I'm referring to has been really quick to adopt technology. And when I speak to them about a new tech, they're like, "Oh, we're just onboarding a tech right now. We can't look at something else right now." But it's accelerated their scalability. And yet, many family businesses are not structured that way because they're not being led by a disruptive successor or someone who's a young, visionary, hungry. And so they're more structured for slow, incremental growth. And so I think sometimes they feel like they have to compromise who they are or their values versus the disruptive successor. They're making the values. They're deciding them. They took over for their parents. Who didn't even have like strong cultural values in their business.
Right.
So you're dealing with 5,900 mom and pop family businesses that have to adjust to a centralized procurement platform, and I'm sure they see the wisdom in it once they make the move. But is it a slow is it a slow buy for them to sign on?
It
Yeah.
was not now. I mean,
Yeah.
so the company's BigRent's been around for 10 years, and I would
Mhm.
say that there was definitely resistance to it. And like, why do I need you? I have my own customers, and I don't want to do this because it's going to erode my margins. And none of those things are actually true once you have a chance to see it for yourself. But it took a long time. I would say it didn't really happen organically within the space. I think we've all um, become more familiar with the Amazonification of the world,
Mhm.
and we order everything we want online. And I used to resist Amazon. I never understood it for you. And then when you're COVID, everything's Amazon. And
Right.
then it's like, why do I need to go to the store anymore? I just click a few buttons and it shows up. And I think that has helped. And there is a generational shift. I'm a Gen Xer. The baby boom is now retired. We're in charge temporarily, and then
Mhm.
you have these millennials behind us. And my children, millennials and sort of Gen Z, adopted technology from the time they were tiny.
Right.
They had an iPad in front of them when they're 4 or 5 years old, and they don't know any other way. And I think that's helped some of these businesses as they bring their children in. Their children are working for the company. These suggestions are being made. Hey, dad, mom, we have to do these things. You're always going to have the companies that have good values, but maybe the wrong values. Like they'll overvalue something that could hurt the business in that second generation, and they're not evolving, and they're not the disruptive sort of successor. And that's where all these businesses fail. I've seen it personally in my own life. I come from an entrepreneurial family that has family businesses in an extended family, and some of them have been very successful. And where they have, they've embraced technology and change. And where they haven't, um, they were really stuck on something that was a core value, but it just didn't make sense. Taking care of your employees. It sounds
Right.
wonderful, but if
Right.
it becomes an all-encompassing value system and you ignore other factors, the business fails.
100%. I think some of the most difficult personal things that my clients have had to go through is firing or letting go or having a difficult conversation with what I call a legacy employee, someone who's been around since your dad hired him 20 years ago, and he's not making the shift with the younger generation and the new tech that they're bringing on board. He's not on board with managing other people in a way that is um, more, how do you describe it? More current, as opposed to command and control style of leadership or dictatorial. Young people, especially Gen Z, right? They want to be involved in decisions. They want to feel like they have a say. And so that's been a really difficult thing. And I think the biggest structural shift for these clients are making a cultural shift within their organization and getting the older generation on board as the younger generation takes hold.
Don't
Um,
you think that's really difficult because there's skill in that. It's a learned
yes,
skill,
yes,
and most family-owned businesses, their skill is not based around that kind of management. It's they have a unique skill that resonates to the product or service that they're offering. And one of the benefits of I know your background, I know my background. We've been out and worked for organizations where we had that opportunity and learned those skills that are used across industries. When you get up in the private equity world or even large organizations, these sort of learning how to have tough conversations is part of learning how to manage. But
yeah,
when you get down into family-owned businesses, it's not inherent, and you have to learn it somehow. You have to get the coaching or the skill elsewhere. And I'll also say that the Gen Z and millennials typically want to know why. And so my dad's generation, he just told you to do it, so just go do it.
exactly.
And it's kind of like it's hard for me, and we're kind of the tweener between these shifts.
Right.
Uh, but it's taken. I've had to learn and adopt how I interact and how I manage people. It's an evolving process, but I think it's a fairly difficult one for family businesses to navigate.
And how are PE firms who are coming into spaces like the one that you're in? You have a lot of experience with PE firms. Are they adept at this? Do they understand it from an intellectual point of view, but do they have the emotional intelligence around how to transform the younger generation and the older generation and get them, working together?
I don't know. Jury's out. I will say there's private equity is like anything else that you have
Yeah,
absolutely fantastic forward thinking, groups, and then you have some that are a blunt object that this is the way we do it. This is the way we've always done it. This is our playbook,
right.
and implement it. And I've seen where it's failed, and particularly in construction. We have clients that have been part of roll-ups themselves,
Hmm.
but a group come in and you can see it in HVAC. You can see it in pest control. These private equity groups have come and bought a ton of these family-owned businesses, kept the brands with the same name, but then used the back end to basically run it. And inevitably, like they run into problems because their cultural problems are just when you have a blue collar, based industry, and you try
Yeah.
to apply same white collar to that, they're ignoring relationship, and it matters so much. They're ignoring tribal knowledge that hasn't been documented because it's just not that type of business. Because Bob always did it. Bob knows what he's doing, and Bob's been there for 25 years. Private equity group comes in and gets rid of Bob because he thinks he can get it cheaper, and you lose all that institutional knowledge. Some do
Int-
it well, many don't, and it's these are lessons to be learned and to apply in the
Yeah.
future.
Yeah. Just out of curiosity, I wonder if there's any real good data out there on PE firms and their success rate. I haven't run across any, but if you do or know it,
I don't.
let our
I just
listeners
know
know.
my own anecdotal experience.
Yeah, that's what I figured. All right. All right. So, final question is, what advice would you offer to next generation leaders in family businesses aiming to modernize without disrupting what made their companies successful in the first place?
That's a really good question. I could answer it in different ways, but as opposed to just giving advice, maybe I'd think about a little bit more about the process of doing it.
Great.
Because I think this needs to be planned. I think it requires the family to sit down and really look at their core values and be able to identify them and even bring in somebody to help them facilitate the process because these are not skills that most of us just have on our own. And really look at where the business is and where we need to go and start looking incrementally how we get there and have a plan in place. And that next generation, where I've seen it succeed and where I've seen it fail within my own family and the businesses that we do business with, is where that next generation is brought into the process and is included in the planning, where it's not the mom and dad just saying, here's your plan, this is what we want you to do. And they have to spend the time and effort mo- to there has to be a family dynamic to allow for conversation. And where there is not, you have to have somebody intervene and bring somebody in to help. And there are a number of business consultants that can do this. I know you do coaching. These
Yeah.
are good resources. Have a written plan that's changed once a year, and that within 5 to 10 years, this is where we're going to go. And then obviously spend some time and effort learning new skills, dabble in some of the AI, play with Chat GPT. I do. I use it every single day.
Yeah.
The more you feed it and the better you get at prompting, you get better responses of it. I will tell you, a third of our code is written by AI, as people are coding. And within 5 years, probably 85, 90% of it will be coded. A lot of the functions that we do on a daily basis for customer service will just be automated with an AI bot. And but I wouldn't go spend millions of dollars
Right.
changing my business model because who knows if that works or not. And these things are just natural disruptions that happen. The internet happened, the fax machine happened at one point. It just
Yes.
happened faster. We just have to, as business people, be more aware of what's going on and can't have our head in the sand.
Very good advice. I used to have a fax machine. That was many years ago. And this has been incredibly interesting. I think succession planning is a really foreign concept to a lot of business owners. The idea of having a written plan, it's just, there's so much resistance to doing it, I think, by so many. that I tend to lean into succession coaching, which is basically just having conversations, which is what you were recommending, is facilitating that dialogue between the older and the younger generations to get them talking about something that they're not normally talking about that maybe feels taboo because it brings up legacy or death or, really sensitive subjects. So, Scott, this has been really interesting. Your name, Cannon, is no accident. I felt like I was listening through a fire hose, and you're highly intelligent. You're really skilled. You're clearly a very talented manager, and I think what you're doing at BigRentz is super exciting. It's disruptive to the way contractors and supply equipment rental places are doing business, and yet it's not getting rid of the incumbents, the Sunbelt and the United. They still have their place, and seems like you can play alongside them really nicely. So I see a great future for your business.
Thank you. I really do appreciate that. And I appreciate getting the opportunity to talk to you about these just important topics that sort of cut across all industries and all sizes of business, but particularly impact small and medium-sized businesses most.
Yeah, I think we talked and covered topics that are generic or to a lot of other businesses that are facing some of these issues with construction, with labor shortages and profit margins and leveraging and implementing tech. And yet we really got into the nuances of your particular platform. So thanks for being on the show. Folks, you know the drill. If you got some value from this, please give us a good rating on your podcast listening application of choice. And don't forget to continue to subscribe and share this show with other people. This podcast is sponsored by myself, Jonathan Goldhill, and my company, the Goldhill Group, where we provide coaching for growing companies. I'm Jonathan Goldhill, and my purpose is simple: to guide entrepreneurial leaders in family businesses towards more freedom and fulfillment. I want entrepreneurs to get clarity around the changes that will make them and their businesses more successful so they can experience the same freedom I've enjoyed in my life. Our proven practices challenge business owners to think differently about their business and how they're running it, and quite literally become game changers in our clients' companies. Learn more at thegoldhillgroup.com website, where you can schedule your free strategy session. Thank you for joining us on the Disruptive Successor Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, review, and share with a friend who would benefit from the message. If you're interested in picking up a copy of my book, Disruptive Successor, go to disruptivesuccessor.com.